I saw the tape. I know what he did to you.
Oh,
now,
no.
I want to hear it from you.
No.
Tell me the whole thing. Don't lie to me. You little fuck, you did it. You killed him. You son of a bitch. You fucking killed him.
No! What the hell you want from me now? Quit your crying. I can't understand a goddamn word you're saying. You little sissy, you make me sick. Oh, looky here. Who the fuck are you?
Who the fuck are you?
Hey, this is my cell, Jack. Who the fuck are you? You his lawyer, ain't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, with your fancy suit. I heard about you. Well, my. You sure fucked this one up, counselor.
A hotshot lawyer takes on a case that could make his career, but it just might change everything he believes in first. This week, we discuss who can say someone is a tall glass of water, smart gangster fashion choices, and what could have been this movie's bonus webisode. We also reveal our underrated films of the last decade before finding out if Primal Fear stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says Gladiator with a glutton. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody. My name is Alan Noah, and this is the Test of Time podcast, where we look back at movies, usually from the 80s and 90s, and we say, hey, do you stand the test of time, you movie from the 80s or 90s or some other decade?
That's right. And when he says we, he means me, James Brief.
You are the other half of my we. That sounds weird. That was a weird sentence.
But we probably shared a couple Wii games. We probably had save files in Super Mario Bros. Wii, so you were the other half of my Wii game of New Super Mario Bros. Wii.
Way to save that. Good work.
So I was thinking, the 2010s or the teens, basically 2010 through 2019 are done. I was thinking it would be fun to talk about movies that maybe slipped under the radar and not necessarily like an indie film that you heard about.
All right. So we're going to talk about our underrated movies of the last decade.
Yes, like for example, I'm going to say one, such a wonderful film that I just heard had 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which doesn't necessarily mean everyone gave it 100 out of 100, but it means that every single critic said this was good. It's actually a sequel I hadn't seen the first one to, and that's Paddington 2.
I have heard that was like an unbelievable movie, and I feel like I saw people talking about it on Twitter, that it was like, this is better than any Disney Pixar movie. Like, see this with your kids. And I have not seen it with my kids.
It's absolutely awesome. Once a year, I have my nieces and nephew. They sleep over and we watch a film that we can all watch together. Last year, 2 years ago, we watched School of Rock and the kids loved it. And this year we watched Paddington 2 and everyone loved it. All right, so that I highly recommend if you haven't seen it. The hype is true. I'm not going to say it's the greatest film ever made. I'm going to say it's going to put a smile on your face. It's very well done.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what about you?
I'll put two movies together for my answer. Date Night and Sisters. And the thing they both have in common is Tina Fey, who I love and think she is just phenomenal. Date Night sticks out in my mind because that was, I think, literally the first date night that Courtney and I went on after our son was born. So it was like, kind of a big deal that we had a night out to go to the movies, and we picked for our date night a movie called Date Night. Steve Carell and Tina Fey, they're like a married couple, and they go out for what's supposed to be like a romantic night, and they get caught up in some like criminal thing. I don't really remember a ton of details, but I just remember it was really funny. And then 2015, Tina Fey was in Sisters with Amy Poehler. Literally came out like right around the time of Star Wars The Force Awakens. But Courtney really wanted to see it. And I was like, yeah, sure. I like Tina Fey. I like Amy Poehler. Hilarious movie. It kind of like plays with a lot of like the tropes of like, the kids have the house to themselves and they throw a big party, except these are adults that do it and they destroy their parents' house. It's really, really funny. So I'll count those two as like a pair of underrated movies from the last decade.
All right. I'll change genres. And this was definitely an indie film. I just happened to see it again. Really cool sci-fi film, Upgrade. And it's not wacky like, 300-year sci-fi. It's where we're going. So it's a realistic, sometime this century. They may get it wrong, but sometime this century. It's very interesting, well acted, simple concept, but it's pretty cool. So Upgrade.
Interesting.
Yeah, check it out. It doesn't look like it's that expensive of a film, but they still did everything they needed to do.
Okay. I would also throw The Cabin in the Woods on that list for me, just because it was a horror movie that played with all the conventions of the genre in a really interesting way. I think we've mentioned it on the podcast before.
It's a very enjoyable film. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that one did get hype, so maybe that shouldn't count as an underrated movie, but it's not like Get Out where everyone was talking about it. If it slipped by you, check it out.
Yeah, there's a film we're definitely going to review, probably, I would say, in 2 years when the Winter Olympics return. You know a film I'm referring to.
Cool Runnings?
Right. It's, I think, from 1992, but it's about 1988's famous Jamaican bobsled team. And there's another fantastic story that I had never heard of from the 1988 Calgary Olympics, and it involves this British guy. He wants to be like a ski jumper, and ski jump is sort of like bobsled, but even more than bobsled. It's absolutely insane. These guys are flying in the air. Just realize they're falling by gravity for like 12 seconds. I mean, these guys just get destroyed when they don't know what they're doing. And Taron Egerton, he's the guy that's become famous from Kingsman, The Secret Service, and Rocketman. But
what's the name of this movie?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say it.
You've been talking for 20 minutes about it. You haven't said the name of it.
It's called Eddie the Eagle.
Oh, okay.
And it's Taron Egerton and Hugh Jackman.
Oh.
And it's a real small film that really, it's underrated film, but you're going to have a lot of fun with it. Eddie the Eagle.
Okay. Another one I would say is Chef, which was written and directed and starred Jon Favreau, who everyone loves because of Iron Man and The Lion King and The Mandalorian. But we watched him in Swingers, and, he can act too. And that was just a really phenomenal movie that just was a blip on the radar, came and went from theaters. Did you see that by any chance?
No.
It's really, really good. Basically, he just plays like a food truck chef, but it's about his love of food, and it's about his love of cooking, and it's also profoundly about social media too at the same time, but not in like a lecture-y kind of way. It's just really entertaining and really good. And Jon Favreau can tell a story, and it doesn't have to be, CGI or take place in space or anything. Like, he can tell a story about real human beings, and definitely catch that if you've got, an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it is. But really, really entertaining movie.
All right. I'm just going to make some very quick, I'm not going to talk about him very much. I'm just going to quickly mention, I've always been a fan of Tintin. It's a Belgian comic. My dad's from Paris. We were always raised on those books. And it was a very enjoyable. Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson, they kind of co-directed it. There was another film, Tag. I had a lot of fun with it. The third act is a little different than I thought it was going, but the first two acts, I enjoyed the hell out of those. And another one is, it's a blockbuster film you might have heard of, but it didn't make much money, is Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, directed by Doug Liman. It's a fantastic sci-fi film that was a huge flop because it has a horrible, horrible title, Edge of Tomorrow. And it should have been what their tagline was, Live, Die, Repeat. It's kind of a Groundhog Day, but an action film.
You raved about that movie so many times that I watched it. I do not think it was that great. Overrated? I don't know. I thought it was rated every bit as much as it deserved to be rated.
You think it should have been a flop? That film should have been a flop?
Yeah. I wasn't that blown away by it. Tom Cruise is good in an action movie. I really like Emily Blunt, but I was not that impressed with it.
All right, well, I disagree. And I also think that there's a sequel coming out. The sequel might be good, but I have my doubts.
All right, I'll rattle off a couple others quickly. This is 40. I remember really enjoying, but I saw it when I was closer to 30. So now that I am 40, I want to watch that one again. The Way Back, that had Steve Carell. I remember really enjoying that one. Ex Machina, I don't know if I should even include that on the list.
Nice.
I mean, everyone loved that movie.
No, everyone hasn't seen that film.
No, I'm just saying, like, that had, like, good buzz. That, like, if you know about films and you heard about it. The Lobster, I thought was phenomenally brilliant. Did you see that one?
I heard it's brilliant, but I didn't see it. I really have no plans to see it. Maybe I will based on what you're saying now.
See The Lobster. I didn't love the very, very end of it, but just the entire concept and the way the world is built, and Colin Farrell is amazing. Pop star, never stop, never stopping. I love, love, love The Lonely Island, and that movie is so fucking hilarious, and it was a complete bomb, and that makes me sad. It was so funny.
I didn't see it, but I'll admit, while I find those SNL shorts funny, I don't find Dick in a Box hilarious. I was always curious about Pop Stars.
Pop Star. It's brilliant. It works on a million different levels. Also, speaking of movies that are gut-bustingly funny, I just watched Good Boys. I was on a trip. I watched it on the plane. Literally, my son was worried about me. I was like laughing so hard. My body was shaking. I have not laughed that hard in a very, very long time. And then I do just want to give one last real quick shout out to Standing Up, Falling Down, which is a tiny indie film that is coming out in 2020, like limited release. It came out last year on the festival circuit. I saw it because my friend wrote it. So, you know, full disclosure, I'm biased. But it's really, really good. Ben Schwartz, Billy Crystal are in it. It's phenomenal. And you should definitely check that one out because it's just really smart. It's really well crafted. And I would highly, highly recommend that one.
Cool. So, yeah, I mean, those are films from the last decade you might have missed, so check them out. Endorsed by Test of Time. Maybe not Edge of Tomorrow by both of us.
No, definitely not. I do not endorse that.
But the other one's fully endorsed.
And this is a good segue because the movie that we're talking about today, Primal Fear, I feel like that was underrated or underappreciated or under whatever. I never heard of this movie. Is that crazy?
Well, it's kind of like this time of year, the Academy Awards happen. It's the spring. What happens to me every time is that there's the first time I've heard of a film. And I heard of this film when Edward Norton was Best Supporting Actor because the people going up for that award that year, it was a really big deal. There was James Woods. He was in Ghost of Mississippi. There was Armin Mueller-Stahl. That movie Shine, that was getting so much attention that year. And then there was William H. Macy in a little film, Fargo. Mm-hmm. And there's Edward Norton. You always take notice of a newcomer getting an Academy Award nomination. And then there was one more, and this is the winner that year. This guy was a newcomer as well. He actually was in a film that we saw. He was in Coming to America. He was getting a haircut.
Oh, Jerry Maguire, Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yeah, as Rod Tidwell in that film. We have not reviewed that film. We'll review that. Maybe one of the launches of the NFL season one year.
So yeah, like I was completely unaware of this movie. I didn't really know anything about it, and I didn't really look into it before I started watching it. So just a quick recap. The movie's about defense attorney Martin Vale, played by Richard Gere, who takes a case of an altar boy, who's Edward Norton, who's accused of brutally murdering the Archbishop of Chicago. Vale soon finds that the case is not what he originally thought it would be, as he uncovers secrets about the defendant, the victim, and who really holds the power in Chicago. Ultimately, justice is served. Or is it? So, I didn't remember this movie coming out at all. Was it a hit?
Actually, it did pretty well. It opened in April of 1996, and it was number one in the box office, almost $10 million. I don't have the budget, but I'd guess this is probably in the teens even.
Sure.
Knocked the Birdcage from number one. We're going to review that film.
Definitely.
Because at the time, that was a landmark film, and I wonder how all those things are going to hold up. But this film wound up spending 3 weekends at the top of the U.S. box office, and it's one of these drama films. I don't think you go for it being $100 million. So, it did well for itself, probably boosted itself after the Oscars, and is a profitable film.
Yeah, and the movie starts off with Martin Vale. He's this attorney, and he's being interviewed by a reporter for some cover story. And he's basically trying to get this guy with a reduced sentence. We don't really get the whole story right away. It's not really clear if he's like a gangster or if he's like a member of the community that like the authorities don't like because he's trying to keep the community safe and protect it from these developers.
No, I think he's a criminal. I think
so?
Martin Vale's getting a criminal off, yeah. And not only does he get a criminal off in the beginning, but he makes the city pay this guy like $1.5 million.
He was attacked by the police. Like the police like beat him. The state or the city or whatever is saying that it was justified, but he was saying that he, had the crap kicked out of him by the police.
While being arrested for his like other criminal activities.
As Martin Vale would say, allegedly.
We see him later in the film, and he is not an upstanding member of the community. But Martin Vale like gets him off and gets him paid. You're supposed to get that Martin Vale is he's the Johnny Cochran guy. He can get anyone off.
He does literally have a line later when he's talking to Edward Norton's character. He says, "I'm what you call a big shot attorney." He's really making it very clear what his character is.
Yeah, I think celebrity attorneys probably started with the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then there's this Archbishop Rushman, who is the Archbishop of Chicago, who is brutally murdered, attacked, like savagely attacked, carved up. And we see this guy, Aaron Stampler, running away from the scene. And that is a young Edward Norton.
A baby-faced Edward Norton.
Right.
And we watch this Edward Norton on a chase. And it's such a 1996 thing because 1996 was, I think that's 95, whatever the OJ chase was.
That was before 96.
Yeah, but this is like the time of this is the first time you have these helicopters chasing high-speed chases. This is when this stuff is first starting. It's very common today, but I think the film makes it like breaking news. Like the helicopters are following this guy because, the Archbishop has been savagely murdered.
Right. And Vale decides he's going to take the case pro bono. He's clearly a well-paid lawyer, but, he's doing this basically for publicity. He wants to get his name in the papers. The reporter who's interviewing him earlier, is giving him a cover story. Like, he likes the press.
Yeah. And we meet the team that's going to be prosecuting Aaron Stampler, and it's played by John Mahoney,
right?
The late John Mahoney, I should say. And he's the district attorney, and the ADA, the assistant district attorney, Janet Venable, is played by Laura Linney, and she's a fantastic actress.
She has a great line at the beginning of the movie where she's smoking at like some event for the Archbishop, and they're like, "You can't smoke in here," and she's like, "It's a bar, isn't it?" Because she is standing right next to the bar. And it's a recurring thing with her that she smokes when she gets stressed out. But, to be fair, people do yell at her for smoking indoors repeatedly throughout the movie.
Yeah, and this is 1996, so this is the time that there are certain cities that banned all smoking indoors.
Right. I'm not going to look up when Chicago banned it, but it's a thing where, at that point, people would yell at you for lighting up indoors. Speaking of other actors in this movie, you have Maura Tierney, who's on Vale's team. Also, Andre Brower.
Oh my God. There's something about his role on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He plays the old stiff man, and he's a young guy and even kind of plays that kind of studying to maybe be a lawyer someday. Oh, gee shucks, Mr. Gere. He's a young guy here.
Right. And on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he's also got like the authority and the gravitas. Also, he's just a bigger person. In this movie, he is so skinny. He's like, it looks like if he like turned sideways, he'd disappear. Whereas, on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he's a imposing figure. I don't mean to say he's fat, but, he's definitely just a bigger person now than he was back when this movie came out.
Exactly.
Also, Terry O'Quinn is on Shaughnessy's team,
right.
the district attorney, John Locke from Lost. He's not totally bald in this movie, and he's got like a real creepy mustache. And then there's Frances McDormand, who plays the psychiatrist or the shrink, I guess, who's evaluating Aaron. And Vale wants to have her spend a lot of time with Aaron to really see what makes him tick. And in fact, when the trial first starts, they say, how do you plead? And Vale doesn't want to answer because he says that he needs a full psych evaluation done. And the judge is like, no, guilty or not guilty, you need to say it now. And he ends up pleading not guilty.
Yeah, and speaking of the judge is also Alfre Woodard. She won an Emmy Award for when she was in The Practice, and she's been in a lot of films, and she's been nominated for Academy Awards. She's great in this film. She's like a no-nonsense judge, but like fair to both teams, but she's very good in this.
Right. So Vale is investigating the case. Aaron says he didn't do it, but, he was fleeing the scene. He was covered in the Archbishop's blood. He had the Archbishop's ring in his pocket. But Vale's theory is that there was a third person in there because that's what Aaron says. There was another person in there and he blacked out. He loses time, which has been happening since he was a little kid, and he doesn't remember what happened. So Vale, for whatever reason, believes this kid, even though in the beginning of the movie he says it doesn't matter what's right or wrong, there truth or not truth. All that matters is what he says is what happened. But he's trying to figure out what happened, and he's not really getting very far with Aaron. So in the course of his investigations, Vale finds out that Shaughnessy, John Mahoney's character, who's his old boss, lost a lot of money doing a real estate deal with the Archbishop. And it's interesting because then you're like, oh, wait, so did Shaughnessy have the Archbishop killed? I was wondering that. Were you wondering if that was like a real thing?
I didn't really understand the side plot, to be completely honest. It didn't really go anywhere. Like there was a personal vengeance. It almost seems like there was like a little webisode you could watch, like a little prequel of like Richard Gere's character and John Mahoney's character, really understand what was going on here.
I think that's fair. It made sense to me, but yeah, it is one of those red herrings that comes and goes where you think that they're like going to unravel this big conspiracy about, like the real power players in Chicago. And basically Shaughnessy threatens Vale, like, don't fuck with me. And then Vale fucks with him. And then Shaughnessy apparently has that guy from the beginning of the movie that Vale got off, like, has him killed.
I'm not saying I don't understand it. I don't really understand where it fit into the huge narrative, and as if there was going to be some big payoff for this side plot. I found it completely boring. So getting back to the main story, Martin Vale, he kind of wants to plead insanity, maybe, like this kid is totally nuts, but he already pleaded not guilty. And I didn't know this, but I guess you can't change your plea. I guess that makes sense, because then people would just plea it right before the case is about to be, go against their favor. He has Frances McDormand, this psychologist, this shrink, analyze him. Kind of sounds like a typical family history and social history. Turns out he was like a homeless kid. He was taken in by the Archbishop, which seems to be, a lovely thing to do, take him into the orphanage. And you find out that the Archbishop was doing something sexual.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily that the Archbishop was molesting him in the way you traditionally think of it.
Right. He was sexually manipulating him.
Right. He was making Aaron record these sex tapes with his girlfriend and this other altar boy and possibly other people as well. And the thing is, in this case, there's no motive for Aaron to murder the Archbishop. All he says is that he loves him and he took good care of him. But now that we see that he was being sexually abused by the Archbishop, now there's a motive. But Vale finds this sex tape through this other altar boy. And now it's like, well, do they introduce this tape as evidence, which will make the Archbishop look bad, which is what Vale wants to do, but it also gives Aaron motive to kill him, which he does not want to do. So he ends up doing this kind of workaround where he has the tape delivered to Janet's apartment. And so then she has to make the decision of, does she introduce the tape as evidence or not? Which she does, but then she does it in a roundabout way where she has Andre Braugher's character talk about the tape and then she introduces it as evidence. So it's like this chess game back and forth that kind of, when you really think about it, doesn't really amount to much because it's just like, well, they had to introduce the tape as evidence, so why did they go back and forth 3 times doing it?
I mean, I think it was just a game of, they don't know if they want to put the bishop on trial because he was murdered and butchered. And if you say, but he was pimping these kids out, basically, and, making them do porn films. If you introduce this, people understand why Aaron did it, but it's not going to make it not guilty. So you're going to say maybe he was driven by this abuse that he had to murder him. That's going to be a pretty tall order to, it's a pretty tall glass of water.
I mean, doesn't that mean a tall person?
I don't know. I'm not. I feel like that's a Southern expression that I'm not Southern enough to say.
I think I've heard Northerners say that.
Yankees.
Yeah, he's a tall glass of water. Oh, I did just say it with the Southern inflection. Anyway, speaking of people with a Southern accent, Aaron is a very polite Southern gentleman, but once or twice he just kind of like shows like a little anger. And then when Vale is talking to him, like after he's been questioned by Frances McDormand, he flips out and just becomes this other person, Roy, his alter ego. And Roy, who weirdly doesn't really have much of a Southern accent.
No, he totally speaks in a completely different mannerism.
Yeah. But Roy admits that he killed the Archbishop. So then Vale feels like an idiot because he really believed that this kid didn't do it. And okay, maybe he kind of sort of didn't, but also he kind of sort of did. And he can't change the plea from not guilty to pleading insanity because the trial's like halfway over or whatever. So he's stuck. But basically what he does is he ends up putting Aaron on the stand and kind of hopes that Roy, this other personality, will come out.
Yeah, and he realizes the only way to get him out is to anger him because that's the way he's always released Roy. So Martin Vale puts Aaron on the stand, and that's a big deal to put the defendant on the stand.
Sure.
Because, they have the right to not be on the stand. Usually they don't take the stand because they don't want the cross-examination.
Right.
But this time it's his own defense attorney, and he's just talking to Aaron very calmly, but then he grabs the microphone so no one could hear, and he just goes like, "Quit your crime, boy. Like, why don't you stand up like a man?" Like, he's trying to say these things that he thought might trigger Roy, and it's not working.
But then Janet starts cross-examining him, and she really lays into him and says, with all the horrible things that the Archbishop did to you, of course you'd want to kill him. You'd want to strangle him. You'd want to cut him up, right? And, really provoking him.
And she's really trying to get him to admit to motive. That's what she's trying to do, and it's really well done. And he looks like he's about to crack.
Right. I mean, because that is like the only thing her case is missing is motive. So now she has it. She's trying to get him to admit it. And then Roy emerges from Aaron, attacks Janet, like leaps over the witness box or whatever you call it. I don't know what you call that little box, but you know what I mean. And attacks her and is escorted out of the courtroom, like by 4 people, one holding each arm and one holding each leg. And that's it. The judge basically says, okay, well, I'm going to have him reprimanded to an asylum. The trial's over. Everyone agrees that that's the right thing to do. Vale agrees. Janet agrees. The judge kind of like rips into Vale by saying like, if you want to plead insanity, next time you plead insanity or I'll have you disbarred. And I couldn't help but thinking like, okay, yeah, I get it. You're like the tough, no nonsense judge. But literally at the start of the trial, he tried to delay the plea until he got a full psych eval and she said no. So it's not like he didn't try to do that.
That's actually a very good point. Yeah, I totally missed that.
I mean, I also didn't really get why the judge yelled at Vale earlier in the movie for like going after Shaughnessy. Her point was like, you just publicly aired your grievances to make your old boss look bad, which is true. But at the same time, he was like showing that someone else would have motive against the Archbishop, which you would think would be totally relevant in the case. She was supposed to be a hard-ass judge, but I didn't really understand some of her rulings there.
I think that you make a good point about the psych evaluation before they plead. But you kind of think the film is over here. Justice is done a little bit because he's like, we're going to get him to a hospital. And you kind of feel bad for this guy because you could make the argument that Aaron, the character, is innocent, and there's this Roy inside him that if you really have split personality, I mean, that's his other personality.
Aaron didn't kill him. Roy did. Aaron is not guilty. It's just that these two people live in the same body, and then, what do you do? But then there's one last twist at the very end where Vale is talking to Aaron, and Aaron says that he blacked out and doesn't remember anything. And then as Vale's walking away, Aaron says, tell Janet I feel really bad. I hope her neck feels better. And Vale's like, wait, I thought you blacked out and didn't remember what happened. And then Aaron starts doing a slow clap.
Oh yeah, just like the Joker in Dark Knight. Let me ask you, did you catch it?
Catch what?
I mean, catch it as in, did you realize what that meant? Or did you think that was a screenwriter's error?
At first, I thought it was an error. And I actually started writing it down in my little notebook of like, that's a major continuity error. Ha ha, I'll be smug little podcaster. But then immediately Martin catches it too. So it wasn't subtle.
So what were revealed is that it was an act. And he faked the whole split personality thing. He knew what he was doing, but he knew he couldn't butcher the guy. So he made this whole thing. And Vale is just like dumbfounded and jaw dropped. And he only says like one thing. And he just goes, so there never was a Roy? And what a great reply that he says.
There never was an Aaron.
Yeah, because there never was an innocent altar boy. And the Archbishop just, he messed with the sociopath.
Yeah, I mean, really that is the right word, is that this character is a true sociopath, sort of like Hannibal Lecter, we just talked about in Silence of the Lambs, like able to manipulate everything. And I had never seen this movie before, so I did not see that coming. But then as soon as they make that reveal, and the movie ends like right after that, I start going back in my head and I'm like, wait a second, does that really make sense? I'm not so sure that it does, because I don't know if it really tracks. All right, so Aaron or Roy, whatever you want to call him, he hates the Archbishop. He brutally, savagely murders him. He runs away. At what point does he come up with this plan? Because think of everything that has to work for this plan to not get him convicted of murder. He has to basically have a lawyer who trusts him. He has to be examined by a psychiatrist, but not a specialist. Like Janet even says that when she's examining Frances McDormand. She's like, this isn't your specialty, right? And she's like, well, no, I guess technically you're right. So like if it was someone who could really identify a sociopath, he'd be screwed. So a lot of things very conveniently worked out for Aaron/Roy that he couldn't have possibly foreseen.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I guess there's a lot of stories where someone had a pretty clever criminal defense attempt, but it didn't work. Yes, this is one where a lot of pieces had to fall together. I guess the only thing is you could say the case probably in real time, if it took place over 6 months, would be a little more realistic for all these things to happen. And we were just watching the highlights of those 6 months.
I get that, but also to that point, like it takes Aaron/Roy a really long time to reveal this other personality. I mean, what the fuck's he waiting for? If that's his whole game plan, like he could have just like been convicted while he's like, ooh, I'll only show a little hint of Roy here. Like, no, let your attorney know.
Well, not necessarily, because if there's no motive, and he knows this, if he's only convicted of second, third degree murder or even manslaughter, he's like 18 years old. He might honestly think, I'm gonna butcher that son of a bitch and I'll be out at 35. They give me 25 years, fine. I'll be a good boy in prison. I'll maybe get out in 16, 17 years, get out in my mid-30s. Maybe he's even thinking something like that. I don't think he's thinking rationally, like he's totally gonna get away with it, but I think you understand his motivation for killing him. It's not like he's a random sociopathic murderer. There's a reason why he kills the Archbishop.
Right. But that's the end of the movie. So, James, what do you think? Does Primal Fear stand the test of time?
There's a twist. So with all twist films, can you watch it again? And both of us unanimously said, without a doubt, that The Sixth Sense was very good on rewatch because it was almost like fun to watch the second time to look for all the clues. And watching this again, this was my, I think, second time ever seeing it. I think it works in that I knew the twist that Aaron was Roy. That was a fake, but it was really fun watching it. And you make a very good point about everything had to work together. And did he have this plot from the beginning, or maybe change his mind? Maybe they're going to find motive, or I don't know if they will. But I think it was pretty consistent in the Aaron Roy stuff. They didn't make any mistakes until they made that purposeful mistake that you and Martin Vale were supposed to pick up on.
So are you saying that Aaron slipped up when he said, tell Janet I'm sorry? Or did he do that on purpose too?
Oh, I think he slipped up. I think he's surprised that Vale was not in on it because he's like, oh, I thought we were giving each other clues. Like those little, like, act like a man, boy. That was hysterical. I was totally reading you. We were dancing, man. I mean, you understand from that scene why he was nominated for the Academy Award. I mean, everything else was very good. I thought that last scene he just sold it.
I mean, if that was an accident and he didn't mean to reveal it, then he's a pretty shitty sociopath.
He messed up, yeah.
Then again, that sort of plays into my thing that he was very lucky that he made it through the entire trial, and he only messed up when it was okay to do so with the one person it was okay to mess up in front of. Just pretty convenient.
I think it's fair to say maybe he is one of these he needs to reveal his plan to his partner. It's possible. I think that is possible.
Like a Bond villain?
Kind of, because he was his partner. He needed him. And they both used each other. Martin Vale is going to be the most famous lawyer in the world in their fictional universe. I'll say something else I didn't like about this film. The whole side plot. I like John Mahoney. He's great. I thought it was just boring. The goon that they were defending, he wore this ridiculous 90s goon outfit, which was like a turtleneck with a sports jacket on the outside. It was, I couldn't take it seriously. He had kind of like a flat top haircut. Like, he looked like sort of like someone who was a random henchman in like Streets of Rage on Genesis. You know, one of those beat 'em ups on 16-bit. Didn't he look like a caricature?
I can't stop laughing about the turtleneck and the jacket.
It's pretty bad.
It's perfect because then like you can take the jacket off and you can be casual, or you can put it on and you're ready for like the gangster meeting. So it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, it's very 90s. That being said, the acting in the film was fantastic, and in some ways these procedurals have made courtroom movies almost like, what are you really bringing to the table? And I'll say I think this was a fantastic episode of one of those procedurals. If you like a good courtroom drama, this is not as good as A Few Good Men, but it's really a good time. You've heard the spoiler from us, but I think my second time was a real good time watching it. So I'm going to say for me, it stands the test of time. I'm curious what you were going to say, Al, but it works for me because I found it interesting. But on a scale of 10, it's more a 6 out of 10. It teeters on the side of stands the test of time.
Well, let's go through some of the things that don't stand the test of time first. That gangster who wears the turtleneck and the jacket, he gives Vale a CD. The sex tape is on an actual VHS tape. But you could say, all right, well, if they redid the movie today, it would just be like on a hard drive, a jump drive, something like that. So it would be digital, but there would still be a copy somewhere. There are a couple of expressions that kind of made me laugh in the movie when Shaughnessy is like talking to Janet about Vale. He's like, you were balling him, weren't you? Like they were sleeping together. That is not a thing I've heard in a very long time. Janet, when she's talking to Aaron on the stand, he's like, he used you to get off. Just a couple of like little turns of phrase just kind of took me out of it. I do also think, though, that when you hear a story about a member of the Catholic Church sexually abusing an altar boy, making him perform in a sex tape is not what you think of. And it does sort of seem weirdly tame. I mean, I guess that's a poor word choice, but like you expect it to be like he raped the kid. And this, while terrible, of course, is not as bad as you would expect. And I sort of think if you made the movie today, it would be a much more brutal abuse.
You bring up a fantastic point. This is 1996. I don't think the Boston Archdiocese, I don't think that case blew up yet.
No, I don't think so.
Really did it. This brings up something that it was a little ahead of its time to bring up an archbishop, because today I don't think that thing of like, how dare you try to dishonor a high-ranking member of the Catholic Church? Like, you wouldn't dare bring this up in trial.
Yes, 100%. I mean, today, if an altar boy murdered a high-ranking member of the Catholic Church, the first thing everyone would think was, well, was he molested?
Exactly. It was a kind of a twist that we heard he was even molested.
Right. So all that stuff doesn't stand the test of time. And like I said, I do think there are some plot inconsistencies and some of the chess moves of the courtroom drama don't fully work for me. However, I was very entertained watching this movie. I wanted to see what was going to happen. I was with Vale. I believed that Edward Norton's character didn't do it. And then I was like, oh, wait, he did do it? Oh, wait, it's a split personality. And then I was also thinking, like, in a world where I'm familiar with Fight Club and not familiar with this movie, I'm like, wait, that's kind of weird that Edward Norton plays someone with multiple personalities in two of his well-known movies, but only kind of, because in this movie, he doesn't really have multiple personality. But still, you're just looking at this cast. I mean, everyone in this movie is a phenomenal actor. I don't know that I love Edward Norton's fake Southern accent, but whatever. I mean, it's just a really amazing cast. Everyone does a phenomenal job with the material. Richard Gere, John Mahoney, Andre Braugher, Laura Linney, Maura Tierney. Maura Tierney doesn't have that much to do, but even still, I really enjoyed watching the movie. I was hooked. And for that reason, I'm going to say that it does stand the test of time. It's close, but I just really enjoyed watching it. So I'm going to say yes. I do also have to say one other thing that's not related to standing the test of time. This movie has a terrible title. I mean, you were saying earlier about Edge of Tomorrow. Okay, yes, that's a bad title. Primal Fear, I would think it's a movie about a dinosaur that like rampages through a city.
Horrible title. I didn't even think about it, but it's a horrible title.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a better suggestion off the top of my head, but it doesn't tell you anything about what the movie is, and maybe the movie would have had a stronger showing at the box office or won more awards if it had a better title and more people saw it. Maybe not. I don't know, but it was poorly titled for sure.
Yep. But I'm surprised about that, Al. I thought you were going a different direction, but I guess that's 2 for 2 this week.
Yes, and that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we'll be back with another movie that also starts with PRI, weirdly. Private Parts, the Howard Stern movie. I know you're excited to talk about this one.
That's going to be fun to talk about, and you're not going to go, how did this film get titled Private Parts? I think it will be more than obvious.
Well, it was named after the book of the same name.
Right. But it was his, autobiography of all his private moments.
Right. And a double entendre because, oh, you rascal Howard Stern. So we're going to talk about that next week. In the meantime, you know where we are. We're at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Talk to us. Let us know your thoughts on Primal Fear. Talk to us about anything. Your feelings, your day at work. It's okay. Whatever. We're here for you. You know? We will be your Francis McDormand. You can confide in us.
That's a great way to end it.
We'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.